All right, welcome. This is class plans and sequencing. So this is going to be a module that's going to um, be used for the rest of this training because this is going to talk about how we break down the classes. What are the main parts that you want to consider, make sure that you're including. It's also going to give you a template of things like what you should be considering depending on the moves that you're choosing, maybe a theme that you're following. So we're going to get into all of those different details. All right, so in general, we're going to see that the yoga class is broken down into 4 components or parts of the class. That first part is going to be an intro or a warm-up. This is where we're just letting people know what to expect and get into their bodies. Supporting poses are going to get the body moving a little bit more, prepare them for that third, the cresting point or the peak poses. And then the end of the class usually takes us down into counter poses, resetting the body, and then some kind of relaxation or meditation. So let's take a look at that first component, the intro and the warm-up. So the intro is going to be your short and sweet, who you are, what type of yoga you teach, maybe an intention for the class, what your students should be expecting, and maybe giving some permissions, whether it is permission for them to modify or asking permission for offering adjustments, all of those things. But we want to keep it short and sweet, usually between 30 seconds and a minute. The warm-up, depending on the type of class, the level of participants, could be anywhere from 5 to 10, maybe even 15 minutes. Generally, I would say for our purposes in the fitness setting, we would want to plan on about 10 minutes for the warm-up. And this is going to include centering, maybe getting into the breath, but definitely moving in those 3 planes of motion. So let's take a look at what this intro warm-up might look like in a class. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Tracy. I teach a flow style of yoga. So we're not only going to get into some poses, but we're also going to explore the transitions in between those poses. We're going to work on just moving into the joints of the body. We're going to create some heat. We're going to find our flexibility, move into some strength, and challenge ourselves with some balanced poses today. So let's just go ahead and find an easy sitting position. So we'll want our sit bones to press in. Maybe place your hands on your knees. You can place them down into your lap. Feel free to either close your eyes or leave them softly open. And just start to feel the breath. Notice the movement of your chest as you inhale and exhale. Maybe notice the movement of your belly. Take these next few breaths to just set your intention. What would you like to get out of your class today? As you start to get a little bit deeper into that breath. So the next inhale, see if you can make those ribs expand out a little bit more. And as you exhale, feel the crown of the head, the very top of the head, lifting so your spine gets taller. Shoulder blades drop down. We're going to start off with just dropping the chin to the chest, stretching out the back of the neck, and maybe take that left ear over to the left shoulder. Softly move the right ear over to the right shoulder. Do this a few times. I'm not trying to force anything. I just want to feel some movement here. Maybe let the head take some full circles. If that doesn't feel good for you, just do what feels nice and releasing in your own neck. If you are going in circles, take it over to the other side. Recentering back, we're going to take our arms out to the side. Just reach them back behind, stretch open into the shoulders, and then interlace your fingers in front, turn your palms out, press your hands forward, round your back and bow your head. Take a deep breath into the back body here. And lift those arms up overhead. Let's roll the shoulders down and away from the ears. And when you press the palms up to the ceiling, feel the rib cage lifting off of the waist. And let's release and bring the hands behind the back here. Interlace, pull the shoulder blades together, lift that heart, and take a breath, stretching out through the front of the body. And release. Taking those arms out to the side, right fingertips drop to the floor, left fingertips reach up, and we're just going to find a little side bend here. If you look up at the sky, make sure that your arm's not blocking your view. So if it is, just pull it back behind you. Notice that nice side body stretch. And bring it back up. Over to the other side. Shoulder rolls back. Getting that nice stretch. And up. Now we'll find a little twist. Take those left fingers across to the right knee, right fingers back behind, twisting around. Shoulders are parallel to the floor. Spine is tall. Gently release, and let's take it over to the other side. Draw your belly button back towards your spine and feel that twist all the way from the bottom of the spine up through the top of the neck. And return. Let's start moving into our flow. Inhale, interlace the fingers. Exhale, press the palms forward and round the back. Inhale, lift the arms up overhead. Exhale, release the hands and bring them behind the back. Nice. And pull the shoulder blades together as you inhale, opening through the heart space. Exhale, tall spine, release the hands. Inhale, arms reach out. And exhale, let's take that side bend. Inhale, slowly bring it back to center. And exhale, over to that other side. Inhaling up, we're going to come into that twist. Nice and smooth. Keep it going while you exhale, exhale, exhale. And inhale back to center. Exhale to the other side. And inhale back. Let's take those arms up overhead, place those fingers in front. We're going to come over onto our hands and knees. So however that feels good for you. Placing those hands beneath the shoulders and the knees beneath the hips. Draw the belly button back towards the spine. Engage through the core here as we drop the belly. Lift the heart, head and sit bones, stretching into our cow pose, and then rounding the back. Inhale and exhale, find your flow with your cat-cow. Taking a few more breaths here, adding any hip movement that might feel good for your body. And then let's sit our hips back and find a child's pose. Walking those fingers out. Feeling that nice stretching through those shoulders. So that would represent a intro and warm up. Let's take a look at where to go from there. Supporting poses. This is really going to be dictated by what it is your ultimate or peak poses, cresting poses are going to consist of. Because depending on what that challenge is, we want to make sure that the poses we put in this section will build the heat, create the movement, and prepare their bodies for getting into those more challenging poses in the peak or cresting part. So mine is going to be building into a balanced pose of half moon. So I want to think about some of the movement of the hips, since we're going to have some hip opening, moving into perhaps triangle pose before jumping up into our half moon pose. So when I'm thinking about my supporting poses, I want to be getting heat in the hip. I want to be creating movement through that part of the body. So let's take a look at what that might consist of. And depending on what level of class, so if you're starting to go through your class and you're noticing that the main portion of your students are beginner level or maybe have issues that may require some additional time, take that extra time. 20 to 30 minutes is a good period of time to spend in your supporting poses. So we'll come back up from that child's pose. And we're going to come back to tabletop. Take our left leg and reach it out to the side. Toes pointed forward, foot flat. Press it in. You'll start to notice some stretching down that inner thigh as you start to do your cat-cow poses here. So what we're looking at is the hip or the pelvis is rotating around that leg bone. Just take a few moments here to feel that movement. Stretch into it, gain some of that flexibility, and then bring it back into your tabletop. Switch it over to the other side. So we really want to press that foot into the ground so we can really activate through the muscles and feel that rotation of the hip. And coming back into your tabletop, turn the toes over. We're just going to push back, stretching out the soles of the feet. Maybe lift those knees off a little bit. Press into the tops of the hands, fingertips, grip, lift the knees, and begin to straighten the legs. Walking out, stretching through the backs of the legs. Let your back feel released. Walking your dog. Look in between your hands and walk the feet forward. Keep a nice deep bend in the knees here. We still want this to be stretching through the backs of the legs, the hamstrings. And we want our back to feel relaxed and released. The top of your head reaching towards the ground. And we're going to take this very slow rise. So stacking the spine, one vertebra at a time. Let the head and the arms hang. Getting up to the shoulders and then head. And shake that out a little bit. We're going to move into our sun salutation. So finding that mountain pose, sweep the arms up, and then forward fold. Remember, bend those knees. Release through the back. Halfway lift, hands come down. Find that downward facing dog. Good. We're going to come forward, drop to the knees, and then let the chest come forward. Find your cobra and press back into a downward facing dog. Look in between the hands. Walk the feet forward, halfway lift. Deep fold. Sweep the arms up. And so oftentimes when I'm teaching, I will have two mats, one forwards and backwards and one going lengthwise. And so I change my orientation throughout the class for members to see what it is that I'm doing. So I'm going to change position because we're going to start adding to that sun salutation. So rooting back into strong mountain pose, engaging through the legs, sweep the arms up, and hinging forward. Notice if you can keep those legs a little straighter this time, heating in through the body. Inhale, halfway lift, and then exhale, take it back to our downward facing dog. Good. Inhale, and let that left leg reach up. Exhale, step it through. Drop the knee. You can come to the fingertips, place your hands on a block, just stretch into the hip. And we're going to hinge back a little bit, straightening through the front leg. Inhale, stretch. Exhale, back. A little flow here. And then we're going to place that opposite hand down and twist towards that bent knee. Reaching up, we're going to stack the shoulder blades. And bring the hands back down, this time to the inside. We're going to turn the back foot over, lift the knee, and drop to the inside of the foot and open up into nice, low, extended side angle. Bring the hand down, drop to the knees. Let's come back to our tabletop. Turn the toes over and back into a downward facing dog. Inhale, right leg lifts, steps, and drop the knee. So again, let's sink into that hip. We're stretching the front of that back reaching leg. Heart stays lifted, and then hinge it back. Maybe bowing the head, whatever feels good in your body as you hinge forward and back. We're going to take that twist. So reaching up, stacking the shoulders, and bring it down. This time the hand comes to the inside, back foot turns, lift the knee, rotate, and let's find that nice low extended side angle. Bring that hand back down. Let's come over to the knees. Turn the toes over and press back. Look in between the hands. Walk the feet forward, halfway lift, deep fold, sweep it up, and so now we're going to take it up to the feet. So depending on your class and where they are, you might want to go through that flow a couple times. But we're going to move on to increasing the heat a little bit more. So finding that mountain pose, sweep the arms up, hinging forward, halfway lift, downward dog. Inhale, that left leg lifts and steps. We're going to keep the knee up, and this time we're going to rise up into crescent. So the same thing, we're going to twist. So we're going to drop that opposite arm, placing the hand down to the inside of the foot. A couple of options here. The arm can come to the leg, or you can just spread the arms out wide. So whatever feels right for you. Keeping that knee over top of the ankle. We're going to come back up into our crescent. So we're going to open up through the hip by pivoting that foot and feeling that rotation. So just like we prepared with our cat-cow and that extended leg, opening up into warrior two, dropping the backhand and finding a reverse warrior. Just gently touching the back of the leg. We're not pressing any weight into it. And now we can bring that elbow, extended side angle. Remember that arm reaches back so we could look up to the sky. Back into our reverse. And cartwheel those hands, step back to downward dog. Lifting up the opposite leg, step it through, and rise up. We're in our crescent pose. Knee is over the ankle, dropping that opposite hand, finding that twist. Shoulders stack, and the shoulders reach away from the ears. Press that front foot in, making sure the knee stays directly over top of the ankle. And the hand comes down as we rise up to our crescent. Back foot turns, and we open up. So we're in our warrior two. Extend it back. Find that reverse. Keep that front knee bent. Hinge it forward. Extended side angle. Open the heart. And take it back to reverse. And cartwheel the hands. Stepping back. Downward dog. Drop to the knees. Find your cobra. And then take it back into child's pose. And stay here. I like to give a moment of rest throughout the supporting poses. It is a good idea to come down to one of those resting poses, like child's pose, and offer an option. Take a few breaths here, grab a drink if you need. So that's a good idea to do that just before you move into those peak poses. And while your students are taking their few breaths or getting a drink, you can talk a little bit about what we're going to do, perhaps some options for them to consider. Because moving into our peak poses is going to be a little bit more challenging. cresting poses or peak poses are going to have a little bit more challenge for your students. There may be some students, especially in the gym setting, that are not going to be able to do some of these poses. So be aware of that as you are teaching your classes, and think about options that could be available for someone who may have an injury, may not be able to get down on their knees. So we'll talk a little bit about some of those considerations, but I want you to start thinking about that now, because when we're looking at peak or cresting poses, we're thinking about our super poses. These are the ones where there's a lot going on. So just because we are standing with our feet apart and bending sideways doesn't mean that we're only thinking about the feet and the waist. Every single muscle is doing something in the body, and oftentimes with our power poses or our super poses, one side of the body is doing one thing and the other side is doing another. So let's take a look at how the cresting poses build in my example class. All right, so we got into the hips. We really warmed into them with our warrior and having the body moving side to side. And notice that as we are doing these warrior-based poses, our hips are kind of sitting like on a tabletop, and that upper body is stretching, and everything down here is holding strong. Well, now we're going to straighten this leg. We're going to move into triangle pose. With triangle pose, we want a little shifting in the hips. So now our hips are going to move a little bit like a pendulum. So let's just take that left foot, put it out. Let's find a warrior two here, gauging through the legs, and then straighten that leg. Lock that front knee joint out and then give it that micro bend. Same thing with the back leg. Micro bends, muscles are engaged. We're not locking out a joint and giving up our muscle activation here. Take your hands right at the crease of the hip and just find a little movement here, side to side. And tilt it. Feel that left hip stacking underneath of the right. Let's do this a few times, noticing the stretching here through the back and the inner thigh, all the way into where that sit bone is. Arms come out, we're going to reach, and then drop the hand and reaching up into our triangle pose. So we're going to feel a lot of stretching here. If you have a space that has wall space, anyone who's having trouble with balance, you can take them against the wall. And this way, they can even feel how they want that top hip reaching back, how they want this back shoulder close to the wall. And it's going to focus that stretching sensation more into the area, because a tendency here is for people to want to get to the floor so bad that they're going to stick their behinds out in order to get their hand down. But what we want is everything in this nice straight line. You can come back up, take it to the other side. And again, finding foot placement, rotating through the hip, and then finding your triangle pose. Some other options, if you have a space that has a window and there's a ledge Oftentimes you can have the front foot pointed towards that, and then the person can place their hand on a ledge. If you're working in like a senior type class, you can always pull out some of the chairs, like Silver Sneakers chairs, and be able to place hands onto those chairs so that we're not getting too deep into muscles that might not be ready. Although we've used our supporting poses to really get that movement happening. So now that we've done some of our triangle poses, let's move into our challenge pose. So here I give options. We're going to lift that back leg. If you don't feel like that is available for you today, get deeper into your triangle pose. That is a super pose. Make sure we're acknowledging to people that just because they choose to stay with a certain pose doesn't mean that they are doing any less. They're still going to work, and they're still going to get deeper into one of those poses. So now I have my triangle pose. I'm going to come up, I'm going to bend my knee, and I'm going to take my hand to the floor and lift my back leg up. So I usually like to have a block for this. I like to encourage my students to use a block as well, because then we can keep this parallel to the floor. If you take it all the way down to the floor, you can see that my upper body is kind of tilted down. Another thing we can do is bending into that front leg, but it's a lot more fun to straighten through that leg, extending out with the opposite leg, and bring it up, taking your block to the other side, and triangle, bend the knee, and cartwheel it over. Ardha Chandrasana, half moon pose. I oftentimes give choices here as well for students to stay with the pose for several breaths, or to move into a dynamic movement and maybe float back and forth into their triangle and Ardha Chandrasana. So then, once we spend a little time there, we bring it back to the ground. So maybe taking a moment back into our mountain pose, feeling both feet solid on the ground, engaging through all of those muscles, maybe closing the eyes, hands to heart center, feeling that deeper groundedness of mountain pose. So our counter poses are meant to help reset the body. So for example, if you had a class that was focused a little more heavily on back bends, you would want to have more forward folds and twisting poses in your counter poses to help reset. This is a cool down. So we're going to lower the energy and intensity, and it's not going to focus as much on activation through the muscles as it's going to focus on releasing through the muscles. And then our relaxation. How are you going to wrap it up? Whether it's through seated breath work, or more often than not, some kind of lying in Shavasana, giving a guided meditation, or offering a short period of time in silence. Let's take a look at how the counter poses will work with my flow. So I like to continue, since I like teaching a flow-based class, I like to continue that flow. So I'm going to use that sun salutation to bring me back to the ground. So inhaling, lifting the arms up, and exhaling, folding over. Halfway lift, back to downward facing dog. So I'm going to move into my pigeon pose. I'm going to lift up my right leg, bring that knee to the right elbow, and take that foot over to the opposite elbow, reaching back with the back leg and sinking into that hip. So we moved that hip joint a lot, but we were making the muscles work in order to do that. So now we're going to move into some relaxation, some stretching. Take a look at your students. Notice if there's anybody who's way up here, somebody who's struggling. This can often give some tension in the knee or the hip. We can offer the option to roll over onto the back and do a figure 4 stretch. I like to acknowledge to people it's the exact same stretch. They're just taking the pressure out of the knee and the hip. So do what's right for your body. Turning the back toes over, lifting and back into downward dog. Maybe even taking a moment here to just acknowledge if there's a difference in the way the hip feels on one side. And then taking the other leg forward, dropping into pigeon. Depending on how much time you've left for your class, you can let people spend a little extra time here. Some people really like to get down onto the arms or bring their chest down. You can think about where they should be feeling the stretch. And if they're not feeling the stretch in that way, what can they do to create the stretch? So start thinking about things that you might want to offer in these poses. We do tend to slow down the verbal cueing at this point because we're looking to bring the attention more into centered. We're preparing the body and the mind for meditation. We'll swap over here. Come to a seated position and lie back onto your back. So the knees are bent. I'll show it this direction. Feet hip width apart. Arms out to the side. We'll take both knees and drop them over to your right. Feet will turn up on their edges. This is a very nice, gentle spinal twist. And take it over to the other side. Again, you can offer the option here, if it feels good, to just stay over on one side for several breaths, enjoy that. Or if you like the dynamic movement, inhale, the knees come up, exhale, they drop down. Hence the windshield wipers. Another great pose I like to do is bringing the knees together and walking the feet out. That's going to really stretch through those external rotators. So we're really getting deep into internal rotation here. So we're stretching out the external rotators. Just remember, we do not have as much range of motion in our internal rotation. So just making sure that we are acknowledging to our students that we don't want to feel pain in any of these poses. These are meant to release and to relax. Pulling those knees into the chest, giving them a big hug. I like to offer an extra minute for students to do any poses that they would like to do, that they like to use to end their practice. I might still go through something, and if you want to join me, we'll do this. I tend to see, in a group of 20 people, probably about a dozen of them are doing their own things, and some of them are popping up into shoulder stands and plow poses, which maybe I don't want to put half of my class into because of conditions or level of ability. So that's always kind of a nice little treat to end a class with. And then inviting your students into their meditation pose. So the purpose of those finishing poses, that last minute or so, is about releasing any tensions in the body and preparing the body to be still. Most people will get into their Shavasana, corpse pose. Some people, rarely, but they do take seated meditation. Others will lay on their sides, all different varieties. Let your people do what they want to do, what's going to put them in the place that is most relaxed. Because the goal here is to let go. The goal here is to acknowledge this time that they spent in their practice, taking care of themselves. And so for my class, I may start my meditation off by bringing us into the breath, releasing the body, softening into the mat, and allowing our mind to think about where did our thoughts go, especially in that cresting or peak pose when we're looking at one-legged balances. Did we think about criticizing, oh, my balance sucks today? Or did they think about the acknowledgement of showing up and putting strong effort into challenging themselves? And they recognize the idea that many people stayed at home, stayed in bed, stayed on their couch today. But they were there in that space, sharing the energy, sharing the practice. And then wrapping that around to using the breath to let all of that go. All of the expectations, all of the rewards. Everything being offered back into the universe, letting it go. I like to offer a little thought, a mantra, a focus, something for leaving your students in silence. Because we're looking at the gym environment, the fitness environment, we oftentimes will have people who do not have experience with meditation. So they may not know what to do with their mind. And instead of going into this Zen place, they're thinking about a bill they have to pay or the next thing they have to get to. So we want to offer them something. If we don't do a guided meditation throughout the entire period of time, offer a point of focus before leaving in silence. I encourage you to try to minimize that silence to a minute, no more than a minute. We do generally have about 60 minutes for a class in the fitness setting, in a gym setting. So make sure you aren't gypping your students. We do want to make sure they're getting at least 5 minutes of that centering, acknowledgement, rest and release period of the meditation. All right, so let's take a look at how we can put together our ideas into a class plan. Okay, so this is a template that you can use to do a class plan. So this template is designed for what a yoga studio class would be, which is generally a good hour and 15 minutes or so. But because we are looking at 1, the gym setting, and 2, looking at different levels of ability, I want you to think about how much time each of these sections would include. So my general, like walking in and not 100% sure what I will have in front of me, my default is about 10 minutes into the warm-up, about 20 in my supporting poses, and then anywhere from 15 to 20 for my cresting, and then about 15 or 10 or 15 for my countering and my meditation. All right, so that is it for our class plans and sequencing. You will be using this information from here on out as we are working towards developing these skills in your knowledge of the poses and why we would use certain poses over others, how they go together, and that full yoga class experience. So looking forward to bringing you the next modules and seeing all of your class plans at the end of the training.